Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Coaching Season's Work Reflections Addictive Patterns. My name is Eddie Pabon, and I'm a certified life and meditation coach, published author, and speaker. Today, we're going to be talking about addictive patterns and ways to cope. We have a very special guest whom I love and respect so much, and I'd love to introduce you to her. Before we do that, take a look at Connie Pacheco's story.
He he had me in there sort of like hostage, and he was telling me that he thought that I had either stole something, some drugs or something like that, and that I had given it to the other drug dealers, right? And that didn't happen. I mean, I could say today with all first it was my brother. Um, I don't know why. Right? I never cared to even look into it or whatever have you, even after years of therapy. But he would molest me. With my uncle, it happened from the age of about 8 years old to about the age of maybe 10. From 1982 to 1985, I totally lost it. Like, I got deeper in my addiction. I started shooting up then. It was so bad. I was in the apartment. I was getting high, and the drug dealer was telling me he he had me in there sort of like hostage, and he was telling me that he thought that I had either stole something, some drugs or something like that, and that I had given it to the other drug dealers, right? And that didn't happen. I mean, I could say today with all honesty that if it did happen, I would have said it, right? But that's not what happened. And I was like, holy shit. I felt like I was getting set up, and they needed somebody to set up. I remember them screaming outside in the hallway for him to come out, right? And he says to me, "You go out." I was like, "Pero por qué yo? No, abre la puerta, porque yo sé que." And I was like, "Oh my God!" He wanted me to open the door, and they were gonna use me as a bullet, like a vest. So if I open the door and they're out in the hallway, they're gonna shoot and they're gonna shoot, and I'm like, "Oh my God, these guys are gonna shoot!" And I'm gonna be right in the middle of that. I prayed, and when I put my hand on the doorknob, that I turned that doorknob like this, I was praying inside, and I was saying, "Oh God, please, if you get me out of this one, I won't get high again." This is the thought. This is the prayer, right? And as I opened it, when I opened them, I braced myself for the gunshot behind or the front, but it didn't happen. So when it didn't happen, I said, "Oh, okay, I'm still alive, right?" I didn't go up the stairs. He slams the door behind me, and I was like, I came out to the courtyard, and they weren't there, and I was like, "Oh my God, they're not here." Guess where I went to? Rather than to go, I go to the other drug dealers across the street in the other building, right? It's freaking insane when it's just insane. I went across the street to where they were at. So I'm trying to explain to them, listen, I ain't got nothing to do with it. As soon as I got to that man, grabbed me by my neck and puts a gun into my mouth. And he says, "You told me the truth, I'm gonna shoot you." And at that point I was like, fuck it, like end this shit because I'm tired. I'm just done. I don't know what else to do. That was a part of me. There was a little snippet somewhere in my heart that was like, "Oh God, please get me out of this shit, because I really don't want to die like this," right? And at that moment, my biological mother walks in. This woman walks in. She's never done a thing for me. She goes, "Mira, ¿qué tú estás haciendo con mi hija?" And she grabbed him, and he's looking at her like, "Really? Like this lady's coming out of nowhere. Like she has the heart to do that." ¿Qué tú estás haciendo conmigo? ¿Qué tú estás haciendo? And she grabbed me by my neck and she's pushing me and she's banging the head, she's hitting me and hitting me out the building. And he's like telling her, tell her not to come back over here because you know what? You're gonna be less than a daughter. Da, 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 da. And my mother's hitting me and walking me out. And then when we get to the other building, she's like, mira, contigo la gran puta, tú me vas a matar a mí, tú no sabes, pa, 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 pa. Like she was scared too, but she did it. She was able to take me out of that situation. I'll never forget that because I never thought that my mother loved me. My biological mother. You making me um, emotional. For me, that was her way of saying, you're my daughter and I love you. My mother tells me, tomorrow you're going to go to Promesa. That's the program. Prepárate que you're going to go to Promesa. Go upstairs and that kind of thing. I went upstairs, but I went upstairs to get high. I was still getting high. So even though I had made the promise, I'm not going to get high or whatever have you, I was still getting high. And morning came and she took me to the program. She took me to Promesa. And when she took me there, I didn't know anything about drug programs. I don't know how she found out about this place. It was on 176 in Clay Avenue in the Bronx. And she left me there. So here's the thing. When I learned about addiction and I learned the disease concept of addiction, I realized that it wasn't my fault. But for a very long time, it was the only thing that I had to medicate. You know what I mean? So I know there's a lot of people out there right now that have stories like mine or similar or worse, and they're just looking to medicate. Who wants to feel that pain? What is addiction? What is recovery? What is treatment? And what's the after effect of that? What happens after? What's the spectrum? Education is key. I would say it. Maybe that's why I got into education myself, educating folks, making them counselors, good counselors.
Wow. Well, without further ado, please, folks, join me in the comments and giving Connie Pacheco a warm welcome. Connie, my
Hi.
love. Oh my God, I love you so much. Hi, thank you for
Oh my
joining
God.
us today.
Thank you. Hi, Eddie. How are you? Thank
Good,
you
you
for
have me
having
over
me.
here like, stop crying. You're about to be back on the video. Stop crying. Wow, I respect you so much, and I'm so proud of you, Connie. You should be
Thank
really
you.
proud of yourself, because not everybody makes it out of that. And I mean, look at you today. Let's get people knowing who you are and how far you've made it, and give people some insight and some light and love, just in case they're going through it while they're watching. So tell
Okay.
us, how did you get to Recoveries R Us? Tell us about Recoveries R Us.
I need a minute because after watching that, it's almost like, the person that did this was really good at capturing, an entire episode of my life, and it's just, my hair is just, um but thank you for that. And I hadn't seen the video in so long, so whew. Anyhow, so I'm sorry,
Okay.
what was the question?
Oh, it's cool. I'm still like, all right, yes, I'm still tearing here. And that was powerful. Shout out to Nico Armero, the guy who produced and filmed the video. He's an amazing, talented guy. He's good at what he does. So yeah, what shifted for you? What was the shift, and how did you wind up becoming an educator at Recoveries R Us? Talk to us about that.
So after going into treatment back in 1985, I went into the counseling field, like most people do, right? And I just dedicated my life to helping others just like myself. And for years, I did the counseling. I was director of many programs, and then uh, I taught for a sister program, a sister vocational training program that I was there on a part-time basis for many years, and then I decided to venture out on my own, of course. And for me, with Recoveries R Us, um, basically I thought that, you know, I had capped out in terms of like, what else can you become after you become like an executive director? Like, what else is there? Like, how else can I help people? So I felt that if I can if I can teach folks to become the counselor, I got to toot my own horn, right? I thought I was a really good counselor and I love what I did or what I do. So I figured I send a whole bunch of minions out there, you know, that have a little part of me to do the work that I was once doing, because you know, I don't do direct care anymore, and I figured I can reach more people this way. And that was the birth of Recoveries R Us, where my whole goal is to educate folks on how to provide services the correct way, the appropriate way, the
Mm.
ethical way, the you know, with passion and empathy. And so yeah, 10 years later, here we are.
That's
um
beautiful.
yeah.
It's interesting. I love that you did that. And you know, there's an old adage that goes, if you wanna, if you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man a fish, he'll eat for a lifetime, right? So it's one thing to counsel people, but it's another thing to prepare a bunch of counselors to go out into the world and help other people. Amplifies your reach. It's a beautiful thing. Connie runs a really amazing program at Recoveries R Us in New York City. If anybody is interested in becoming a counselor, definitely check out Recoveries R Us. It's quality, and I wouldn't have anybody else teach me, although I did have a different KSAC teacher because I didn't know Connie at the time I was becoming a KSAC. I wouldn't have anybody else teach me aside from my original person or Connie. So addiction. What is addiction, folks? For those of you watching, it is the fact or condition of being addicted to a particular substance, thing, or activity. This is crucial. I want to emphasize thing or activity. Because oftentimes, and Connie, you can attest to this or not, people associate addiction with drugs, alcohol, tobacco. And while those are the main, you know, three that we all focus on, there's so many other types of addiction. I have a whole list here I want to share with you guys, and you can feel free to chime in. But we have drugs, alcohol, tobacco, prescription medication. There are a lot of people who feel like because it came from the doctor, there's no issue with popping those pills often. You have gambling, foods like coffee and soda and processed foods, screen addiction, gaming addiction, internet addiction, gym and shopping. Most recently for me, crypto addiction, Algorand. So, you know, it's really important to think about these things because there's a lot of stigmas associated with addiction. And we tend to, I mean, I could speak for my old self back in the day. I tended to have looked at people as like, you know, drug addicts, or they must be criminal, or they must be all the things that the media, sort of the propaganda that the media gives us about people who have addictive tendencies or issues with addiction. But the reality is trauma discriminates against no one, right? Adversity discriminates against no one. And so anybody is susceptible to experiencing trauma and or becoming addicted to activities, substances, people, places, and things. So, I mean, I think it's commendable that you share your story so raw. I think that's what I love about you so much, Connie. That, you know, when I met you, you have so much light, you have so much energy, and you're really real about your shit. Not only that, you know your shit from both ends. So, you know, just what is happening when people are reacting to that craving, to those triggers? Could you talk about triggers? Educate us, for the average Joe that's listening. What are triggers, and how does it affect our addiction?
So I think when we talk about triggers, you know, a lot of people don't understand that addiction is a brain disease, right? The first thing that gets addicted is your brain, right? Depending, and it doesn't matter, like you said, it doesn't matter what it is. The neurotransmitters in our brain, and of course, you would have to take a class at Recoveries R Us so we can get in depth about, you know, how the brain becomes addicted. And I'm really big on that when it comes down to the students, because when people understand that it's a disease just like any other disease, it affects your complete biocycle, right? The brain gets addicted, you have no control over that. You can't get high and tell the brain, no neurotransmitters, don't go there, don't do this, don't do that. They're going to do what they're going to do depending on the drug that you're going to put in there, right? So once the brain becomes addicted, it's in control. then the brain is the command center, and it's going to command you to do certain things, right? So then you have the behavior, you have the emotions, you have, the spirituality, everything that encompasses a human being becomes addicted. But the brain is in control. So you have individuals, you have people that do things that they would normally they would not do. So and this is why it's so important to talk about the brain disease, because it takes away from the stigma. When I learned that there was a disease, I had a disease, it was not my fault that I did X, Y, and Z. It wasn't my fault that I did these things to my mother. It wasn't my fault that I robbed, that I stole, whatever. And so people, it takes away from the shame and the guilt, and it allows you to understand. Once you understand that it is a brain disease, it was not your fault. You have to accept accountability for your actions. I get that. But it's just understanding that, hey, you know what? It's not my fault. So most people will say, you know what? If I was in my right state of mind, I wouldn't have done that. Exactly. You was not in your right state of mind. That's why you did what you did, right? Your brain was addicted. It was completely diseased. And so we do the things that we do. Now, that takes away from the shame and guilt. Here's another one. I'll never forgive myself for the things that I did. Right? That's shame. That translates into shame and guilt. So that it takes a long time. For me, it was like, oh my God, I did so many things. I will never forgive myself. And I heard that from the people that I worked with. I hear that from my students. I will never forgive myself. Now, understanding that this is a disease would allow you to reduce and work with the shame and the guilt and say, you know what, it wasn't my fault. I wasn't in the right state of mind.
Heavy stuff. It's very true. We have to be more kind to ourselves in general. I'm always telling people this, like, why is the voice of the mind so evil to us, to ourselves, right? We're always so harsh. But you mentioned something when you were talking about the biocycle, and I wanted to talk about that today because this is really important. Speaking to stigma and biopsychosocial factors, we're talking about biological, psychological, and social factors that impact one's addictive tendencies or addictive patterns, right? So what that means is biologically, some people are predispositioned to having substance abuse addiction, or their bodies chemically, like you said, the neurotransmitters have already been exposed, maybe because a parent who was pregnant used substances or had addictive patterns and used things while they were pregnant. But there's the biological, the psychological, right? Things that are going on mental health wise. And then social factors, like there's peer pressure. There are people who smoke and cigarettes and drink alcohol as social, engagement tactics, and to lower inhibitions, right? And so when we talk about biopsychosocial factors, you really need to look at the combination of elements that affects the individual, not just the drug, the substance, the act, right? I remember one time, I know you've probably heard some amazing stories, and I'd love to hear anything that you have to share. But for me, the shift in judgment mindset, early counselor days, I was still learning. I still had, I was getting fine-tuned. And I had a woman who sat in front of me, and my judgment just started kicking up. I saw, she had like blisters all over her face, and she just looked like life just sucked her up, chewed her up, and spit her back out onto my desk. I did an assessment, and I asked her how old she was, those standard questions. How old were you when you first used? And she said, I was a baby. And I was confused. And it's like, okay, well, what do you mean a baby? What were you, like 7, 8, And she's like, no, I was a baby. I was like 6 months, a year. And I'm like, can you elaborate on that? And she explained that her mother was an alcoholic, and she used to put alcohol into her bottle when she was feeding her as a baby. Oh my God, shifted my consciousness and perspective from judging and stigma to empathy and understanding. And I wanted to give that woman a hug because her bio, psycho, and social factors were hacked from the very beginning of life. So she knew nothing else but alcohol use as a way of coping and just existing, right? As a nutritional value factor, which was just crazy to me. Any stories or anything that you've heard that you think speak to this?
Oh, man, yeah, we could write a book on the stories that we hear. But one of the things, and I think that for the industry as a whole, we're always talking about, nurture, nature. Is it nature or nurture, right?
Yeah.
The genes, was this a gene thing that was passed down on to me? Did I get this from my mother, from my father? Did I get it from the environment where I grew up at, from my friends? And I think the industry as a whole is also shifting, where at this point in time, it doesn't really matter where you got it from. Let's talk about recovery, right?
Mm.
Because it is possible. And I think that those kinds of factors, if you will, enables people to stay stuck on, what, I was born this way and I was destined to be this way. Okay.
Mm.
But here we are, and there is this thing called recovery. And so there's different pathways to addiction, just like there's different pathways to recovery. So, how do we recover, right?
Right, of course. And the beautiful thing about science and technology, and newer findings is that while we thought that, once addicted, always addicted and stuck into that cycle, new science is showing that neuroplasticity, something that relates to those neurotransmitters, that wiring in the brain of the behaviors that have you just sort of going on autopilot with your addictions, can actually be rewired. So through daily practice, meditation, different, clinically proven methods, you can actually rewire your brain. So there's hope. There is no, it's too late. Every day is a new opportunity for you to recover, to begin your recovery process, and to explore the life that you wish to live. I think it's really important what you said, Connie. We got to stop talking about our problems and start talking about our solutions, and looking at things from where we want to be rather than where we've been and how we're stuck. You know?
Oh my God, you hit the nail on the head, Eddie.
Hmm.
Oh my God, because throughout my recovery process, right? You learn about addiction from what we've been taught, and now you're talking about this new wave of, right, neuroplasticity, right? So we are able, because we're like the equivalent of, or maybe I don't know if this is equivalent, but our minds, our brains are computers. We're like a computer, right? And we've been programmed
Hmm.
from, even, I believe, even before you're born, when you're in your mother's belly, when you're just like a zygote. I think that the program has already begun. And so whatever that programming was, and especially, some scientists say, from the ages of 0 to about the age of 6, you're programmed. And
Hmm.
so it wasn't until about, I want to say, about 15 years ago, that I started into this. I need to reprogram those programs.
Hmm.
And it wasn't that, it doesn't necessarily have to be that my mother was an addict or an alcoholic and this, that, and the other, that it was a bad, that it was intentional, right? Some of
Hmm.
these programs were because that's what their parents did, and so on and so forth, right? But it wasn't until about 15 years ago that I says, okay, so it's time for me to rewire. I need to reprogram. And I started looking into this, and I started following people, think on YouTube. I
Hmm.
started following people that speak to exactly what you're talking about. This new wave of psychology, Psych K, I think it's called, and it's the rewiring, right? And something as simple as listening to positive affirmations right before you go to sleep with a certain beat that they use is a way of reprogramming those thoughts, or those programs. And some of these programs are about, we grow up thinking that, and sometimes I catch myself doing this, and I say, no, I'm not. When I do something or I bump myself and I'm like, oh my God, you're so stupid. Oh, consciously, I'm like, no, you're not stupid, Connie. And I shift that immediately, right? But at one time, I'm not only was I thinking what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling about myself wasn't matching with who I was,
Hmm.
right? And so 15 years ago, that this is my this trajectory started for me 15 years ago, where I said, oh no, I need to change that. I need to change those because they become belief systems, right? I need
Hmm.
to change the belief because what I'm projecting and what I'm thinking wasn't matching what I was feeling. So I
Mm.
didn't see the progress in my life, and I was like, "What is it? I'm working hard. I'm doing what I have to do, and I wasn't progressing. I was stagnated in both, in everything, in my recovery, in my personal life, in my relationships, in my growth as a person, as a woman. I couldn't figure it out, you know? And when I started to put those things together, where I said, these three things need to match. Oh my God, my whole
Mm.
life changed. It was a huge shift in everything, from even my spirituality, you know? And it's not to say that, everything is peaches and creams, because we know it's not that, but I just have a different perspective on life today that I didn't
Mm.
have maybe 15, 30 years ago.
It's a beautiful thing, and that shift, you made my hair stand because I know that shift, that realization that the mind that you carrying around, that voice that goes with you everywhere, has not been serving you, and you've been using the power of your word. And they say, be mindful of your words. They call it spelling for a reason, because your words have magic.
Mm,
Be mindful of your words and how you think. I like to tell clients that I coach, take a look at that voice of the mind, question it. We oftentimes just let it go and ramble on about how bad we are, how not good enough we are, how everything is the end of the world and doom and gloom. But the reality is, would we be talking to other people like this, people that we love? Is the voice of your mind loving you, or is it tearing you down? If it's tearing you down, why do you accept that?
right.
Right? And then beginning to notice allows you to sort of like check that voice, like you said, no, Connie, no, you're not stupid or incapable, you got this, right? And then
Mhm.
that's different. You want to be your own motivation in this process, folks. It's really easy for you to kick yourself when you're down, but why would you do that? You wouldn't do
Right.
that to someone you love, so why would you do that to yourself?
Right.
uh,
And that example right there, like if I bump into something, I'm like, oh, I'm so stupid. If I see you bumping into something, I'm like, Eddie, you okay? You all right? Why can't I use that for myself? Like I can empathize with you, but I can empathize. I gotta be stupid because I bumped into it. Like who put that stuff there, right? No, it's a whole shift. No more. I said, no, 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 no. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Now it's not easy because we've been wired. It's an automatic thing for you to do certain things and to think certain things. And unless you become aware, and this is something that I learned along the way, you know, I got to a point where I was like, why am I thinking what I'm thinking? Right. And I bring it to consciousness, like I bring it to my awareness, right there. I'm like, oh my God, why am I thinking about that? Uh, it's not serving me. So let me let it go.
mm,
And then I
mm.
consciously focus on something else, and place my focus on something that it's beautiful, that I want to create, whatever it may be. Because a lot of times we get lost in our thoughts, and that's that automatic pilot. Boom, 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 and you're
Mhm.
gone, and you're entertaining all that programming. It's an automatic pilot. And so it's not an easy shift, but it's doable, and it works wonders when you do it.
Yes, it takes practice, just noticing it and deciding, you know what, I'm not going to think that way. Why am I thinking that way?
I'm not
Like,
thinking that.
yeah. So, one more thing that I wanted to mention about stigma really quickly, because I think this is important to stick. Other than the criminals and the people who, those types of people, I've heard people say, right? I heard a story once about a doctor who had an addiction to buying, it's really weird, but it was classical music.
Mm,
And he didn't tell his wife about it, he didn't tell anybody about it, but he knew it was a problem. He kept going, he just kept buying classical music, and every time he would take a lunch break, he'd go to the music store until one day he realized there was a problem when he had a patient who was about to give birth, and instead of going to do the surgical procedure to get the baby out, he left the woman there waiting
wow.
to go shopping for music, went home and lied to his wife about it. And it was that realization that the addictive tendency to the activity was the problem for that doctor. Right? So you have a very successful, educated individual who is on autopilot. That
Mm,
addiction is just taking the reins, putting all of their personal relationships, employment, and everything at risk, and even the woman who's giving birth, right? So, Connie, talk to us about what clinically significant impairment is. If somebody's watching this, other than everything that we've mentioned, how would I know if I have a drug problem? Like, what would you consider clinically significant impairment?
Oh my God. So you know that the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for mental disorders, it's like a big fat book, right? And so now they have this criteria, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the criteria says it's like, what is it, 8 or 10, and then you have 11, 12, tolerance and withdrawal. And so they have a way of defining what addiction is, and you would know that you would have a problem. Sometimes my students ask me questions like, well, what happens if a person only uses once a year? Are they addicted? Well, here's what I think. The addiction, if you only use once a year, but every time you use that once a year, there's a situation that occurs on account of you using, then of course that's a problem. And a situation I mean by, maybe you got into an argument that one year. Next year you fell down the stairs and broke your ankle because you was like under the influence. The year after that, you crashed your car, whatever. So whatever the situation, you had an argument, whatever, whether it's small or whatever have you. But the point is that there's an outcome to your use, right? There's something happening every time you use, right? And some people, so there's the addiction factor, because you know what, Eddie, people have a tendency of thinking that the only addict is the person on the street corner, and that is not the case, right? Addiction
There are a lot of people who look really glitzy and glammy.
it doesn't discriminate. You know that. And it's
Yeah.
other addicts call other people the functional addict, right? Everybody functions. It just depends how you function. We all function differently. But the point is that is this substance, is this gaming, is this social media, is that whatever it is, whatever the target behavior is, if it is producing negative consequences in some sort, some way, then if you want to classify it as mild, moderate, severe, it's up to you,
Yeah.
right? 'Cause denial is denial is hard.
Denial is an ugly thing. But you know what? Clinically significant impairment, is usually marked by continued use despite negative
Let
consequences,
it go.
like Connie mentioned, right?
Mhm.
So, like, if you are continuing to smoke cigarettes, despite the fact that you have lung cancer, COPD, I've seen this in patients,
Right.
literally died to that last breath of cigarette because there was no oxygen to their brain. They had COPD, but the addiction was so strong. So continued use despite problem areas in health, mental health, relationships, social, financial, emotional, loss of employment, problems at your job, legal issues, and also I think it's important to note. Oh, and you have tolerance and withdrawal; those are clear signs of addiction.
Right.
If you need a drink to get through the day, or
Mhm.
you can't function, definitely something to note. But also, I think it's important to mention the stages of change to folks, because I think this is a good little moniker for any behavior, right? If you're watching this and you're
Any
like, oh,
behavior.
well, I don't have addictions because I'm perfect and my life is perfect and I don't do those
Mhm.
things. Okay.
Right.
Watch the scrolling on the internet, because a lot of us can't live without our phone.
Hmm.
So stages of change, and I think talking about what actually is happening in the brain, we talked about, those neurotransmitters, and we talked about how it wires your brain. What exactly is happening when you're participating in these addictive patterns, right? There's floods of dopamine. There's a chemical called dopamine that is your pleasure and reward system, right? It gives you
Mhm.
a sense of pleasure. It also gives you the motivation to do something when you're feeling pleasure. So it's a part of your reward system in the brain. And what happens is every time you do something like, say, pick up your phone and scroll through, you see some likes or some comments on your posts, you get this little rush of dopamine. And
Mhm.
then it's followed by serotonin and dopamine uptake, which means that your body releases a little bit of some pleasure juices and then sucks it back up for later. There's only a finite amount of this. Your body can only produce a certain amount of dopamine. And the more you flood it, the less you get in uptake. This happens with drugs or any of the addictive patterns that you're partaking in. When you participate in the addictive activity, your brain is flooding dopamine into your system. You're feeling good temporarily, but then there's a backlash, right? So like you go from feeling great to you've used up all your juices and now you feel like shit, right? And you need said activity, said drug, said substance to be able to feel good again,
Right.
right? So now that we've covered that, the stages of change, you want to go through that? We want to give people some education. I love the first one, pre-contemplation.
Pre-contemplation, yeah. So pre-contemplation is exactly that. Well, pre-contemplation, we also know it as the denial stage, right?
Hmm.
This is the stage where I don't see if there's a problem with my behavior. To the person, to the target behavior, whatever that is, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whatever. Um, there's the person finds more benefits than they do problems with the behavior, right? They're in
Yeah.
total denial. They don't even know. They're not aware. They're not aware that this and things could have happened. Children could be removed. You could go to jail. Things could have happened in your life, and it's like, no, it's not that. It's the parole. It's the people. It's the mother. It's my sister. It's my wife. It's everybody else but you. That's
Yeah.
the denial stage.
I lost my kids, I lost my house, I lost my job, but it's not the crack.
No.
It's the government conspiring against me. And right,
Right.
so pre-contemplation is pretty much you don't know that you don't know.
Right.
So some of you keep hitting walls and keep on hitting roadblocks, and you keep doing and blaming and pointing the finger outwards. Perhaps maybe if you keep running into the same situations, it's not a conspiracy against you. It's not the universe conspiring. It's literally your behaviors that are starting to affect your life. You can take a look at that and hopefully shift from not knowing in pre-contemplation into contemplation.
Right. And that is when exactly what it says. You're contemplating. Well, maybe. I don't know, but maybe this is something that I should look at. You're contemplating about whether or not this is really, really the issue, right? And
yeah, so that, we go from not knowing that we don't know and just mindlessly doing things to still kind of mindlessly doing things, but noticing, being like maybe, but I'm gonna still go get high, and so then you shift hopefully from there, and this applies to any behaviors, by the way, folks.
That's
Food, right. It's a stage of change model, usually used for addiction, but you can apply this to any areas of your life for behavior change. So you go from contemplation to preparation.
Mm-hmm.
Preparation is more like, I'll take this one, I'll let you do action and maintenance. Preparation is more like, all right, maybe I have a problem. Let me do some research and see what my options are and look into it. But that's it. And you can just keep going, right? But you're noticing, you're starting to consider you might have a problem. And then hopefully you shift into action. Take it away, Connie.
Well, hopefully, right?
Hopefully.
So, and then the work happens. It's not when you're in this stage. The work happens when you go from one to the other. So in the contemplation stage, like you said, this is where the person starts to look for that information, and they start to maybe little by little even regulate their use. They're not drinking Bacardi. They're drinking, wine coolers. They're not doing, they're not shooting up. They're sniffing, whatever. They start to maybe some things, little things here and there, and then hopefully the action stage. What that means is that the person has made that commitment and has started working a program of something that has changed completely. So the behavior is put away, right? And to be in the action stage, according to Prochaska and Clemente, they say you have to be there for at least 6 months, where you actually working a program of, I guess, recovery, if you want to call it that. There's different definitions of recovery.
If you've shifted the behavior, because some people are weird with words, right? Oh, I'm not an addict. I just have a problem. Okay, that's fine. We won't use the word addiction. We'll use the word problem. But right. But now, the new behavior has been practiced for at least 6 months and sustained, right? And that's maintenance, where hopefully you have sustained maintenance. But folks, I want you to know, and some of you know this firsthand, and some of you are supporters of people, family and friends who have addictive tendencies. Relapse is a sixth / maybe / part of the cycle stage of change. Relapse or lapse. And what that means is somebody may have slipped, had a drink, did the behavior, did it again. If they never do it again, they shift back into action and maintenance, or they full on relapse and could go back into pre-contemplation until they bring themselves back. Right. But I think it was important to sort of cover the stages of change because it's a powerful tool for behavior modification in general, like for anything that you want to adjust.
Absolutely.
So, Connie, I have an interesting question for you. Somebody asked me this once, and I was like, ugh. What would you say to younger addicted Connie if you could sit down with her right now and give her some encouragement?
Oh my God. I would tell her to run. If I had, man, my life was such a mess when I was growing up. When we came here to Puerto Rico, we came from Puerto Rico. We migrated here from Puerto Rico when I was about 6, and I think that, like most parents, they bring their children to have a better world and stuff like that. And for me, it wasn't. You know, my whole life just went down to shambles. But if I had, that's a good question, and I'm definitely gonna think about this even more because if I had the opportunity to tell myself when I was younger, um, you know, I thought that I knew a lot at that age, and here goes, you know how when we say if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have done half of the stuff that I would have done, right?
Mm,
But even at that age, I've always felt like I was an old soul, old spirit. Like I knew things, and I didn't think I knew more than the other kids and the other people and the grown-ups. I think I know as much as they do, kind of thing. And I will tell her that no, you don't know.
you have no idea, baby.
No idea what you get yourself into, right? First of all, you don't know. That's one thing that I would say. The other thing is that I would tell little Connie um, to ask for help
Mm,
because I hid a lot of the things like anybody else who's experienced trauma. I've hid it. I didn't speak about it. I didn't talk about it. Heck, I didn't even started talking about this stuff until I got into treatment, and therapy and stuff like that. So I would tell her to ask for help. I will tell her to just ask for help, and to just be careful because life is going to throw a lot of things at you, and you know for some reason today I can say that these things have made me stronger.
mm.
But did I really needed to go through that to be this strong? I don't think so. I didn't, like I look back and say I didn't want to go through that. Nobody wants to go through that stuff. So I would just tell Connie to ask for help, to speak to someone who could possibly help her.
Amen. That's beautiful. Which brings me to our next sort of shift. We have about 17 minutes left.
Mm.
And I kind of want to leave folks with some coping skills, tools, information, if they wanted to reach out for help or if they wanted to quote unquote get help for themselves, like you mentioned for you. I know before we shift into that, me personally, my entire childhood was affected by addiction and addictive patterns. My dad was a kingpin of a major drug ring. My mom suffered from heroin addiction. I mean, as far back as I can remember, my aunts and uncles have been drunk. And this is to childhood. I love y'all so much, but it's the truth. And so, I lost a lot of family members, and to people who are watching this who may be trying to support of someone who's going through addiction, there's resources for you as well. But cigarettes, drugs, they kill, and I've lost aunts, uncles, my mother, unfortunately, to this, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing these messages, because I think, if we can save one person, it's worth it. As far back as I remember, my first experience in recovery, I was like 10 years old going to NA and AA meetings because I wanted to understand. I had a neighbor who told me that they used to be a drug addict and went to these meetings. They ran a meeting and they wanted my help to run a meeting. So I just set up chairs and stuff, but I kept an open ear and heart to try to bring some of the information back to my mom, because I figured if I could show her that there was this cool thing for people to recover and it was free and she could go and they have food, then maybe she'd go. It didn't work out that way, but I learned a lot about how to support my mom and about the reality of the helplessness that people feel to
Right.
the addiction. I watch grown men cry and say things that they did that they regret, that they would never do otherwise, right? So, coping skills and tools. The first thing I would say, and you can feel free to chime in at any point, Connie, is support, support, support. Support yourself. Ask for support from family and friends. Seek support from coaches, mentors. There are self-help groups, right? If you're a family member and you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of the addiction, there's a way to be supportive without being enabling.
Hmm.
But don't ever give up on the ones that you love. Give them the love that they need, and be the support for them. I'd say definitely support is one. Seek it. Ask for help, like you said. Is there anything that you want to throw in here? I got a little list I want to share.
Well, no, I mean, just to add on to that, I think people need to learn about addiction. A lot of people are experts on getting high. That doesn't necessarily mean you're an expert on addiction, right? Or you know anything about addiction. So I think learning about it in from all those elements that we were talking about, learning about the disease, learning about the biopsychosocial aspect of it is important.
Hmm.
I also think that in terms of coping skills, we are uh, human beings. We need to find like I don't want to call it a vice, but we need to recharge. You need to take care of yourself, right? And so it's like, when you charge your battery, when you put a plug into the wall, there's two sockets. One is going in and one is going out. So when you have all this stuff in here, where is it going? And
Hmm.
then you're putting drugs in there, so you're adding to that. It has to go somewhere,
Hmm.
right? It has to come out the vessel. So we need to recharge, and that may be getting a coach, that may be finding a counselor, a therapist, that may be going to church, that may be doing yoga, that may be drinking tea, whatever it is. You need to find it, whatever your thing is. And
Yes.
yeah. Hmm.
Yes, definitely, definitely. I agree with that. And triggers, we mentioned triggers earlier. I think it's really important in your recovery process to take note of the people, places, and things that trigger you, meaning make you want to do these things. What is it? Is it a smell? Is it a color? Is it a person? Is it stress? What is making you? And this may take time, self-assessing, but self-awareness is key, and just noticing these things can give you a one up, so you can start to maybe plan around it while you're in that weak phase, right, where you're not sure if you're just going to be mindless and go, but to avoid those people, places, and things that make you want to use. And then I have here self-help, because I think there's layers to recovery, and there's not a one size fits all for substance use and addiction. There's definitely not a one size fits all for recovery, but there's the counselor's approach, if you will, right? And I think starting from the very base level of self-help, meaning not going anywhere, asking for support from coaches and things, attending groups like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. There's a bunch of other anonymouses we could be here all day covering. But these are 12-step programs that are very powerful. There's so much power in sharing your story and hearing others' stories where you felt like you were alone and you felt like maybe your shit stunk, but then you hear other people's stuff and you're like you said, wow, been through similar things or maybe even worse, right? And so then you feel less alone and more part of the bigger picture, that altruistic feeling of feeling like you belong. And then you
Right.
can have people who understand your addiction and support you in recovery. So, and then there's Nar-Anon, which I think is really important too. You can go to Nar-Anon, which is for family members who are affected, family members and friends who are affected by having a partner, spouse, loved one who is suffering from addiction. So you
Hmm.
can go and gain tools and receive support yourself, because folks, this is a two-way street. Not only are you hurting yourself when you have addictive patterns, but you hurt the people that you love the most, because when you love people, you want them to be healthy, you want them to be okay, and you wish the best for them. And when they're suffering, that does not make you feel good, right? And
Right.
so you have to, as a support to people who are loved ones of people suffering from addiction, make sure you take care of yourself too, because you may not be hitting the substance, but you are feeling the effects of the addictive patterns. uh yeah
And just
so
to add on to that,
yeah.
now we have the whole wave of recovery coaching. and peer advocacy, right? So you don't there, if you don't like your traditional treatment settings and the NAA, and if that's not for you, you have coaches. You just like they have lifestyle consultant and all kind of trainer that helps you lift weights or whatever. We have that for recovery too. There's recovery coach. That's a big wave now. So it's a big thing now. Mhm.
Here I am. So, in terms of the 12 steps, I thought it'd be interesting to share this really quickly. We have less than 10 minutes left, but there are 12. So I'm going to read through this pretty fast, folks, but you're going to look them up on Google. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over our addiction, that our lives had become unmanageable. This is really, really important. The like you mentioned earlier, Connie, being in denial, right? Or being in pre-contemplation. When you don't know, or when you feel like you don't have a problem, step 1 is you have to do that first. You can't take care of and get into recovery if you don't feel like you have a problem, right?
Mhm.
So admitting to yourself that you have an issue that had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God as we understood God. Some people have issues with this because they may or may not be religious. Seek higher self, spirituality, whatever works. We're entirely admitted to God, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 4, this is that taking inventory piece, noticing
Mhm.
where you are, what you've done, how you feel, all of it, right? Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Getting it out, letting go of all that stuff you've been carrying around that makes you feel like shit, that's probably inflicting the cycle of addiction, right? Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all of these defects of character. If you have issues with that, again, I always say remove God and put self. Have self remove all of these defects of character. Humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of persons we had harmed, became willing to make amends to them all. This was an interesting step for me because I'd been going to these meetings and I'm like, I like step 8. I want to see who I've hurt. I was young. I didn't hurt anybody, but I wanted to take inventory. And I've always carried that with me. Made direct amends, step 9, to people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Powerful.
Mhm.
Difficult. It's difficult to admit to people, I fucked up, I hurt you,
Right.
I
Mhm.
did some grimy things that made me feel like shit for a very long time. I hope you forgive me. Some people are willing to forgive or not, but it's really important that you do things like this, step 10, where you take the personal inventory and admitted that you were wrong without expectation. Right? A lot of times we want people to be like, "Oh, I love you. Yeah, no, you like stabbed me or robbed me or
Mhm.
whatever." Right? Cool. I
Right.
may or may not forgive you, but the act of just apologizing has so much power and releases that energy, right? That
Mhm.
guilt. Um, Step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Important. It's hard to say when we're wrong. We're so quick to point fingers at everybody. Why they do that? Why they drive like that? You ever notice you drive better than everybody on the highway?
Mhm.
Step 11, sought out through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. And step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a the results of these steps, we try to carry this message to other addicts and to practice these principles in all our affairs. So paying it forward, right? It's like really pretty much step 12. Once you've done the work, then you can start to help other people do the work as well. So we covered coaching, we did peer recovery and support, you got self-help. If none of these things work, theoretically, as counselors, right, when we're assessing and trying to help people, I'm trying to give you this information, folks, just to
Mhm.
help you here. We start to look at treatment options from either detox, if you have substances. Like, fun fact, folks, you may or may not know this. Some people ask, well, why doesn't that heroin addict or that alcoholic just stop drinking or just stop using heroin? Well,
Mm.
you may or may not know this, but if you've been using those substances for a long time, your body needs them to function. And a person can die from just stopping drinking or stopping heroin use when they've been doing that for such a long time, right? So there's a detox process that needs to occur. and you can correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here, Connie. Maybe there's some nuances in recovery. I haven't been in the game for a little while, but the understanding is if you need detox from any of these substances, you can look at a hospital for a detox or rehab. They go from anywhere from 48 hours to 28 days, right, on inpatient. If that doesn't work, what's the next step, Connie?
Well, you have outpatient treatment where you just go in there and you have a counselor, you do your groups, individual counseling. You have residential treatment facilities like the one that I went to where you sleep there, you're there, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I also wanted, so those are your traditional treatment settings and then the self-help groups that you were talking about. But I also wanted to point out that sometimes people, you know, if that doesn't work for you, find something that does. And it could be a book club, it could be a support, it could be a basketball team, it could be a dance class, it could be a martial arts, it could be, oh my god, it could be just about anything that allows you to get back to you, you know, that is worth and valuable enough for you to say, I'm going to put this down and I'm going to do this instead. So not everybody, because not everybody wants to do, you know, some people may not, you know, it may not work for everybody. Like I said, there's different ways of becoming addicted, and there's different ways, there's different pathways to recovery. So
Amen. I think the golden rule is what my pattern of activity doing, is what I'm doing healthy or destructive? Am I going to feel good about this when I'm done, or am I going to feel like shit? We have a question from New York City. Connie, can you tell us more about Recoveries R Us? How can we reach out to you? Is that even possible?
absolutely. I'm in New York City. I'm on 127 East 105th Street, between Lexington and Park Avenue. Our number here is 917-265-8090. We also have a pool of coaches and peer advocates and a wealth of resources, when all the resources that Eddie was talking about. Definitely give us a call.
Awesome. And follow her on Instagram, Recoveries R Us. And we have a question from Texas. I have a family member addicted to painkillers from a car accident. What can I do to help them?
You know, this is a big thing because a lot of people are becoming addicted to painkillers because it's a painkiller, right? You would have to treat that addiction like any other addiction. So you might need to have that person be physically detoxed through, you know, a medical component, and then continue to seek, you know, either outpatient services. The person may need to get into a pain management um uh
Routine, massage therapy, exploring
yeah.
alternatives to pain
Hmm.
relief. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are alternatives to painkillers, there are alternatives to prescription drugs. We didn't talk about mats, um that it's medication assisted treatment services, or mars, medication assisted recovery services. So there are some medications out there for individuals who are addicted to prescription drugs.
Thank you for that. If you're watching, I forgot to mention this earlier. If you have any questions for Connie or myself, now's the time. We have only a couple minutes left. We have a question from New York City. Why is it that people say Mary Jane is not addictive? It makes it hard for us to find services to help stop.
Mm, it is addictive, you know. And here's the thing about Mary Jane. Now, because it's legal, everybody thinks no, alcohol is legal. And look at the problems that we have with alcohol and with cigarettes. So, I don't know who is it that's saying that it's not addictive, because it is.
Mhm.
Anything can be addictive.
Yeah, and I think anything can be addictive. It's true, doing anything in too much without balance is something to take note of, right? Why the impulse and why the need to overindulge? Question from California: I quit drinking Coca-Cola in last October, and I'm still feeling like I'm forcing myself not to drink it. Is this normal?
When last October, you're going on a year.
A year? That's some strong. Let me tell you something about that Coca-Cola. I don't know if they really removed the Coke from the recipe, because people have
Absolutely.
been, in fact, Coca-Cola used to put actual cocaine in their recipe, and they still have a secret ingredient nobody knows about. I wonder what it is.
Yeah, and here this individual is talking about, I'm forcing myself not to drink it, which is what's very interesting to me. And so, I've been in recovery for over 35 years, and it gets easier but it just doesn't go away. I have to be vigilant, right? I have to be careful.
Mm.
So yeah, Coca-Cola, you just need to be very careful.
Oof. Yeah, so good kudos on going a year without drinking Coke. Start to look at what you're doing right, give yourself credit for that. Connie, thank you so much for your love and support. You really helped me today, somebody said.
Oh,
That's beautiful. So Connie, last thoughts. We've already hit the hour mark. I want to respect your time, and I know you're at school. You got your students there watching the video. Hello, students. You're receiving a great education from a beautiful soul. Anything you want to say before we wrap up?
no, I just wanted to say, no, I just wanted to say, right? Well, thank you, Eddie. Thank you so much. This was absolutely awesome. Love to do more things in the future. Thank you for always thinking about me. And, for your viewers, just know that there's help out there, there's hope, and there's somebody to listen. Always ask for help. It's okay to ask for help.
Amen. So, folks, today we talked about addiction, its effects, and ways you can cope to overcome it. Connie, I thank you so much for joining us today. You should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you. I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to a gala tomorrow, folks. I'm excited about that. But so thanks again so much. And thank you all for tuning in and showing Connie some love. Please follow her, give her more love in the comments, and follow Recoveries R Us. Recommend it to anybody who's in New York who may need addiction recovery services or who may be interested in becoming a counselor. And so to wrap up, the goal of coaching season is to provide as many people possible with the education, guidance, tools, and strategies so that they may thrive as the best version of themselves. We provide coaching that brings together the best of science, as well as incorporating wellness-based guidance in personal life coaching, career coaching, life event support, executive coaching, integrative approaches to health and nutrition, and addiction support. We're here for you, your family, and friends. So if you're ready to smash some goals, feel free to schedule a discovery call at coachingseason.com with myself or one of the other amazing coaches. My name is Eddie Pabon. Thank you again for tuning in. Know that you are limitless, light, love, and potentiality no matter what the challenge is. Namaste.